everybody, and thanks for spending part of your morning with me. I'm Danielle James, the Chair of Social Sciences and Associate Professor of Anthropology and Sociology at the Community College of Baltimore County. From here on out, though, I'm going to call it CCBC just to shorten it a little bit. Unfortunately, we are missing my co-presenter this morning. She was double booked, and when I get to the section on the projects that we did, she actually has a cute little explanation of why she couldn't be here with us today. But I will start off, before I talk about the specific projects that we worked on, by giving you a look at our institution. One of the things that I find most disturbing in presentations is when people don't tell us anything about the place where they work. So it's very hard to then figure out if we can do what they've done based on things like size. So CCBC is a large multi-campus institution. We have three what we think of as main campuses that ring the Beltway and the number of extension centers that have somewhat limited services. All of our main campuses we consider full service, where we offer the same classes and the same student services. Of the population that we have here, we're split between credit and continuing education students, and we serve about 45,000 students, so we do have a relatively large student population. The rest of our statistics tend to match pretty closely what you see at other community colleges. We are primarily female. We are a minoritized student serving institution. Students self-identify based on race as minoritized members of the population. We are 89% part-time enrollment for students, so most of our students do attend part-time. We have most of our students that work at least 20 hours per week. Most of our students need remediation. So wouldn't be surprised if those numbers sounded familiar to a lot of people in the room, because it is the population that we see of a lot of community college students in this country. So with that in mind, Ann McClellan and I have both been at the institution for a long time. So looking at these statistics and knowing what we know about the changes in our student population, because we have seen somewhat of a decrease in engagement, a decrease in student success when measured by retention and completion, we both kind of sat down together to figure out if there were some things that we could do in the projects that we could take part in that would try to move the needle on student success. So we're going to, well, me, kind of her, because she did give me an overview, talk about a couple of projects that we engaged in over the last year or so, where we were really trying to see what we could do to help our student population. So for me, I engaged in two different projects. I took part in a summer institute on high impact practices and learned how to use the transparency and assignment design framework. And I've also taken part in our larger institutional high impact practices work. And Anne, who, as she says here, is at this very moment at her son's high school graduation, has received both institutional and external funding to develop our global work initiative and also to take a look at some sustainable assignments and how they play a role in increasing student engagement. And also a bit of mindfulness there. So a couple of things we'll be talking about today, and I hope to get some feedback from you at the end to see what kinds of strategies you're using to engage your students. But I'm going to jump right in. So as I said, I participated in a Summer Institute on High Impact Practices. Now, the TILT framework right now, that's transparency in learning and teaching, is not an official high impact practice, but it does appear to be somewhat of an emerging high impact practice. So we're starting to see it more and more, and it does have some of the qualities that we think of as our traditional high impact practices of having. But when we think of TILT, so we know it's an inclusive pedagogy that really does level the playing field for a lot of our students. So when you think about especially first generation students, students that don't have a lot of community connections that have gone to college, there are some things that we think they know that they really don't know. There are a lot of kind of bits and pieces to the puzzle of success for college students, those unwritten rules that keep you successful. The TILT framework actually kind of pulls back the veil of secrecy on what students need to know to be successful in college. So it kind of levels that playing field for people that don't have the same kind of connections and history of college attendance that other students have. And we know that whenever you are able to improve strategies and help students from underserved populations, that really does help everyone. So it is an inclusive pedagogy that specifically targets people from underserved populations, but then ultimately helps everyone else as well. We know that this also increases student engagement by really getting students involved in the process of their learning. In a minute, I'm going to go over the steps of the framework, but certainly one of the things that you see right away when you're looking at it is that it gives students a way to connect their learning to their real lives. And we know for anyone out there, one of the things that makes you interested in what you do is being able to build those connections. I always have students that before TILT would ask, what am I going to do with this? What does this mean to me? Using this framework actually reduces those questions because you tell students right away exactly how the information they learn is going to be used in multiple aspects of their lives. We know also that this increases retention and completion. And if you look at those first 2 points there, the inclusive pedagogy, and then the second one, the increases student engagement, if you put those two things together, what you are going to see is that students, they come back semester after semester, they persist even when other things are difficult, and they have a greater chance of completing their degrees. So when we're looking at this transparency and assignment design, the framework is actually divided into three standard components. And I say standard in quotes because we know with education, nothing is really one size fit all. There is a lot of room for flexibility. But one of the things, oh, we're moving without me. Okay. One of the things that I do appreciate by having those standard components is that it gives faculty a bit of a guide of what you should have in assignments. Now, I've been writing assignments for students for almost 20 years, and there's some things that you do take for granted no matter how long you've been doing this. So by having the guide that they provide through their template, it makes sure you check all the boxes and making sure that students are able to be successful. So those standard components start with the purpose for your assignment. Um, that's where you would break it into both your skills and the knowledge that students are expected to acquire. So if you think about the way you typically build assignments by looking at your course level objectives, module objectives, that's part of what this is looking at. So you're making the connection for students in each individual assignment for how the assignment fits into the class. What you're also doing there is making the connection for how the assignment fits into everything else that students are going to do, whether it be in that class, their program, and in many cases, other aspects of their life. So it really does break things out into smaller chunks so that students know exactly what they're going to learn, how they're going to learn it, and what they're going to do with it. The second component of the framework is the task component. And for me, this is what looked most like what you typically see in a traditional assignment. So it's your list of this is what you're going to do. And what I like about the framework, however, is that they add something that I didn't typically do with my courses and my assignments. They also have a section where you tell students what not to do, which it never occurred to me that that needed to be a thing before, but that task section that has kind of frequent mistakes that students make. So make sure you don't do this when you're completing your assignment. And finally, we have those criteria for success. Rubrics are popular. We all use them. The criteria for success in the TILT framework actually requires that you do something more than provide a rubric before the student completes the assignment. Their recommendation is that you give students multiple writing samples. So examples of student work that is adequate and examples of student work that is excellent for that exact assignment. And the goal is to have multiple examples in both categories of both adequate and excellent, because you don't want to have students then latch on too much to that one example where you have a greater likelihood of having a lot of repetition. So if you give students multiple examples, they have a number of things that they can look at in the process of preparing their assignment, and they have a much better idea of what your expectations are, which really is what we should be trying to give students a good idea of what we're expecting from them. So this framework is really giving students an explanation of how they will do things and why they're doing things, which once again is so important for students to know how and why if they're going to be successful in any given assignment. So for me, once again, as a refresher, I participated in CCBC's High Impact Practices Summer Institute. And as part of that institute, we were broken into groups of four faculty members from different schools at the college and different disciplines. And within those groups, you were supposed to give, we are moving without me again. You were to give your group members an example of a traditional assignment that you use. And the goal then was to take that traditional assignment and put it through the transparency and learning and teaching framework for the template to redesign your assignment using those criteria. And I chose an assignment for my racial and cultural minorities course on immigration. So a little bit of background. Every semester, especially in summers, I teach one course. It's our diversity course for sociology that covers all of the racial and cultural minorities that you can fit into a short 5, 6, 7 week semester. And I have a module that students cover on immigration. Students don't do poorly on that module, they never have, but it's also not one that students have ever said they had much of an interest in. I do give a short survey at the end of each semester, and I ask students, what part of the class, had the greatest impact on you. And over the years, I have never had a single student say that this was the module that interested them the most. So that's partially why I selected an assignment in that area, but I also selected an assignment there because my lower stakes writing assignment is in this module, and I didn't want to try something completely new where students were going to have a problem with a very high point assignment. And also, I didn't have the flexibility to change our common graded assignment because this is a general education course, so we do have an assignment that everyone that teaches the course gives, so there was no flexibility to change that one. So I picked this one on immigration. And I put it through the framework, completed the template, and shared with my 3 colleagues from other disciplines at the college. Once we shared them out, they took time a weekend to review our original assignment, our assignment that had used the template, and then actually gave feedback, which was great, encouraging, very useful to get feedback from colleagues about assignment design. So they had all the questions that a student would have because these are people that are not versed in the discipline, which is why we were separated into groups with people that don't teach what we teach because they have those questions that you don't think about. If it's something that you've taught for ages and you've been covering the same modules, different assignments, of course, but flexibility with updating, but still basically the same information, you kind of forget the things that people are not going to know if they don't spend a lot of time in that discipline. So that was very helpful. So I linked my skills and knowledge in the course to my common objectives, the ones that we create for every single section of the course, but I also then link them to the individual module objectives that we create for ourselves for our courses. Now, this is something that I've always done because alignment is important, but what I hadn't done in the past was actually share that alignment with students. So with my new tilted assignment, I actually broke it down for students to tell them exactly, this is your course level objective, this is your module level objective, and this is exactly which question in this assignment is addressing that. So I did everything for the students that I would typically do for myself when designing a course, designing an assignment. I let them know. I put the pieces of the puzzle together for them. I also provided them with that task list and the criteria for success in a very different way than what I typically used for assignments. So I think we're probably all familiar with that nice chunky paragraph you use when you're telling students what to do. I broke down the task here in a bulleted list that seemed to be a good way to make the assignment more digestible. So you're telling students basically do this first, do this second, do this third. And I also had that thing, don't miss these things, don't do these things, to give students a bit of a better idea of exactly the order in which they should work through the assignment and common pitfalls not to fall into. So after I worked with my group to figure out exactly what the assignment should look like, I rolled it out in my fall 2021 course. Interestingly enough, I taught the course in the summer while I was going through the institute, but we hadn't gotten to this section of the institute yet, so I wasn't able to use the assignment for the summer, but I did use it for the fall. I did one summer section with my original assignment and one fall section with the new TILT framework assignment. And as I said before, it's not that students typically did poorly on this assignment, but it was never a fan favorite. I did see a modest increase in student grades overall for that particular assignment, so I was happy to see that. But what really made me more excited about this new framework was that in my end of semester survey, what meant the most to you, what that you learned the most about. There were a number of students that actually said this was their favorite assignment. And the reasons they listed were amazing. One of my students told me that they enjoyed this assignment most because it gave them the opportunity to use what they learned here in discussions with other people. Students were saying things like, what I learned from your immigration assignment, I told everyone I know. When they go on Twitter, when they're on Facebook, they're using things they learned in this assignment to in their discussions there. So they're really putting together the pieces of the puzzle once I told them how to put them together, and they're using their knowledge. So I think even more than the increase in grades that I saw from this assignment, I really took the most away from students saying, I told everyone I know about what I learned on the refugee crisis. So it really was a good result there. Now, of course, just having one section so far, that's a very small sample size. I hope that this continues in terms of students being able to use the assignment more and talk to their friends about it and use it as in their Twitter comments, but I can't say yet. It's my plan to teach the course again this summer and use the same TILT assignment for my unit on immigration, but also to create another assignment to see if I can really get some more momentum in all of my assignments in the class. Of course, I can't change everything right away because we do have a course committee, but I'm also working with the committee over the summer to see if we can incorporate more of these assignments into the way we build our course. So, TILT has been great so far. Now, the second project I worked on, and I'm sure this slide is going to advance without me in a second, so I'll come back to it. The second project I worked on was our High Impact Practices project. And this is actually one that is a college-wide initiative that was started back in like 2016, 2017 to get more high impact practices into the curriculum of students across the college. We know what high impact practices are. We've seen the research on this, so we know that these are typically courses that again. Okay. So these are practices that increase retention, engagement, persistence. They help students engage with their classmates, engage with faculty. They require effort over the course of the semester. Students get frequent, rich feedback on them. So there's a whole list of qualities that we look for in assignments and high impact practices across the college. And this is, nationwide research on knowing that this does increase student success, retention, and completion. So the college-wide initiative had the goal of exposing students to multiple high-impact practices before completion. And we kind of made this easy by embedding high-impact practices into some of our most highly enrolled general education courses. So we picked 7, starting with health, the introduction to health, that all of our students must complete to graduate. English 101 has a high impact practice, and some of the more discipline-specific general education courses, psychology, the introduction to computer science course, our biology 110, which is our molecular course that most of our health profession students take. Now, for my area, the social sciences, we embedded our high impact practice in our Sociology 101, our Introduction to Sociology course, and it has been exciting. So we started the process with this course in 2018. We put together a committee. Well, we applied to be able to create a HIP for a class, and once we were approved, we put together a committee of 3 faculty members, one full-time faculty member who received reassigned time to work on the project, and 2 adjunct faculty members that received stipends to work on the project. The goal of this 3-person team was to work with other faculty in the discipline to figure out, first of all, what high impact practice we were going to use, because there's a list of them, and how we were going to use that practice. For sociology, we landed on service learning. None of the other general education courses that had a high impact practice used service learning, and a number of faculty in the department were already using it. So we thought it was a good direction for us to move, since it's really in our wheelhouse in social sciences to do service learning. So we worked on creating a common assignment that everyone that used the HIP would use. We required that students have 4 hours of service, and create and complete a reflection at the end of their service experience. And we partnered with this CCBC Service Learning committee. There's a group of faculty that already received reassigned time to kind of partner with local businesses, local organizations to put in place relationships so that we could send students to them. So we did partner with our Center for Service Learning to make sure that we had what students needed to be able to complete the project. So once we figured out, yes, we were getting help from them, it's 4 hours reflection, we had to determine exactly how we were going to have students take part in their service. And we wanted to provide a number of options just to make sure that we had enough available for all students to be able to take part. So we had a few campus-based service days where faculty would come to campus and create their own project that students could participate in that would count for service. So one of our faculty members spent a weekend on our Dundalk campus packing care packages for one of the shelters in the area. So she had students come in on the weekend and took all the donations that people had brought in to pack up care packages for them. That was our on-location service opportunity for the semester. We also had faculty members agree to take students off-site for service. So that same faculty member, she's amazing, took students to one of our local food service organizations, Our Daily Bread, and they spent a day there serving breakfast and lunch to people in the community. And our third option for students was for them to select their own service, preferably from a pre-selected list that we had, but if they didn't use one of the organizations that we provided for them, they could go through the faculty member to make a recommendation and have it approved before that location was used for their service. So we had a lot of flexibility in how students could conduct their service. And it was great. We had those 3 faculty members participate in the fall of 2020. Fall of 2019, and we had a number of other faculty members who weren't required to use the project still use it. So response was great. Students enjoyed the opportunity across the board, and students actually did pretty well on the assignment of actually going out to do the service and also submitting the reflection. Our plan was to scale up the assignment in spring of 2020, but I think we all know what happened in the spring of 2020 that made this almost impossible for us. Of course, we had to end our on-campus presence in the middle of the semester. All of the service organizations we used were closed. Everything was closed. But of course, we already had this assignment embedded with plans to scale up. People had to do some really quick work to make replacement assignments for that semester. That didn't go well. Fast forward fall of 2020, where we had even more plans to scale up, that didn't happen. This thing that we were shoved into didn't end as quickly as we'd hoped, so it really did make us start thinking about ways that we could still offer the high impact practice for our students, but not require them to have to either come to campus or go anywhere else. So a couple of faculty members got together late summer, early fall, and created a number of alternative assignments that would still give students the community feel without requiring them to actually go anywhere. So we created a number of community-based learning written assignments. I have a list here. One of them focused on school inequality. So it gave students the opportunity to look at schools in their area, up to 10 schools in their area, go to the statewide website for that school, and just kind of get information on where students were facing inequality, then take a look at a couple of organizations in the area and explain what they were doing to reduce the inequality that we were seeing in local schools. Another assignment gave students the opportunity to interview 5 people on their political views, and then, of course, link that back to their coursework and write a reflection on their interviews and people's political stance. We also had an assignment on social movements that, interestingly enough, gave students the opportunity to look at movements like Black Lives Matter and other things that were important to them and interview, once again, 5 people to find out their perspective on the issue. And finally, we had an assignment that gave students the chance to look at public issue in their area, one public issue, and do a content analysis on articles in the newspaper that talked about that issue, and also then look at a local organization and what they were doing to help people. So we rolled those assignments out at the end of the fall semester 2020 and scaled them up a little bit in 2021. And I decided I was going to do one in the fall of 2021. Before this time, I hadn't taken part in the service learning. I don't get to teach the introductory course a lot. So by fall of 2021, when I was able to teach it, I decided I wanted to use one of those assignments. And I picked the public issues research project because I already knew that students, they typically have an interest in things that are going to affect them. Baltimore has a lot of public issues. While we're not in the city, we're close enough to the city that a number of our students actually live within the city. And even for those that don't, they do tend to pay attention to the news. So I wanted to pick something that they were going to be interested in. So I did pick the public issues research project. And honestly, I was blown away by the amount of detail that students put into choosing their public issue, because I didn't choose for them. I gave them a list of samples and allowed them to choose for themselves, and they did an amazing job. We had a number of students choose police brutality. Once again, it's Baltimore, so that was not surprising. Even though I did not use the education assignment, a number of people did look at education. People looked at healthcare. People looked at the impact of the COVID crisis on members of the city community. So they picked topics that they were really interested in. They chose their news articles from a number of sources. It was great. I did scaffold the assignment for them. So I didn't just kind of give it to them and say, come back in 7 weeks and give me your paper. I broke the assignment into smaller pieces, which is one of the more important aspects of having a high impact practice, where students have kind of this sustained work on one assignment. So I broke the assignment into a number of parts, with the first part being very simple, kind of low stakes. Let me know what you're going to talk about. The second part was that content analysis, where they sent me their 10 articles and let me know that they read it by being able to pick out the main point and pick a sociological perspective that they could identify from the article. And the third part was the actual finished paper and reflection. Once again, I was blown away by the students' responses and how they worked through the assignment, but I was also blown away by the things that they had to say about the assignment, because in this course also, this is not the racial and cultural minorities course, but I still give my students a survey at the end of this one as well, just to ask them, what did you think about the assignments? What did you like the most? And once again, this is an assignment the students really, really did like, because it gave them a chance to pick something that they wanted to talk about. It wasn't me giving them something. They were able to choose something for themselves that they were able to work on. So that worked out very well. So in terms of future work in this area, of course, I'm going to continue with the TILT framework. I'd like to add this to more of my assignments. And I also want to use one of Dr. Winkleman's surveys for students. She, the creator of the TILT framework, actually has a list of questions that you can ask students before they start the assignment and after they complete the assignment, about their confidence and whether or not they understand what's being asked of them. So I will actually add some of those questions to my end of the semester survey for my summer course. For the high impact practices work, the last time we had data collected on our service learning project for sociology was before we actually added the student engagement assignments. So certainly for us, there's a plan for us to collect more data now that we've added the alternative assignments to see if students are doing better, if they're persisting, because of course one of the goals in the data that we collect across the board for our HIPs is persistence from semester to semester. So I will be curious to see fall of 2022 if having the assignments in the fall of 2021, if the students that were in classes that used the HIP have a higher rate of return than students that didn't use the HIP. So we're looking forward to seeing that data. And of course, finally, for these activities, both the TILT assignments and the high impact practices scaling up. Doing this in one section of a course, it's great for the students that do it, but it doesn't do much for the students that are not engaged in those activities. So we would like to see more sections of the courses use these activities. Now I'm going to give a quick overview of what Dr. McClellan has been working on. And of course, our projects were very different, so I don't have all the information for her project, but I will share her contact information at the end so that people can reach out to her if you have questions. How are we on time? I think we're good. So Anne McClellan's been engaged in global work her entire career at the institution, looking at how we can prepare students for the global workforce. About 4 or 5 years ago, she worked with a team of faculty to create an Introduction to Global Studies course that would give students intentional work on everything global, whether it's the workforce, healthcare, anything that you could look at through a global lens as part of that course. Once that course was created, she wanted to find a way to encourage more students to take part. So she worked with a team of faculty once again to create an impact approved certificate. So we now have a small 16 to 18 credit certificate that students can earn, a stackable credential that is cornerstone by that Introduction to Global Studies course at the beginning, and at the very end, students do a small project where they write about a global experience, whether it's a study abroad experience or work they've had with someone that participates in some way in the global workforce. So that certificate has been around since 2018, and we've had a number of students complete. So for the specific project that Anne has been working on the past couple of years, she uses that Introduction to Global Studies course and created an assignment where students could look at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The goal of the assignment is to have the students review all 17 goals and then choose the 3 that had the greatest impact on them and explain why. She did provide us with the UN link here so you could see the goals, but there are things like no hunger, ending poverty, climate action, so a list of the things that are most important to people around the world as a whole, but she allows her students to choose the 3 that are most important to them, then explain why. Gave us an example from a student paper. The student here looks like they ranked climate action as their primary concern. And of course, they give the reasons that most young people give. They would like a world to live in, and they do see that things like rising sea level is going to negatively affect their future. So for that student, it was climate change. Gave us another example from a student. Their top SDG was education. And this was particularly important for students during the pandemic because there was a decrease in people around the world. If they were funding education for their students, as we know, unfortunately, many people have to do, there was a decrease in the number of female students being educated because families, budgets were tight. So if you have to choose who you're going to educate, we did see a drop in the number of females attending school during the pandemic. So for some students, that was their reason for choosing that particular SDG. So in addition to this assignment, Anne participated last summer in a United Nations Open Pedagogy Fellowship. And that fellowship actually encouraged a number of faculty to create what they call open pedagogy assignments. It goes along with the open educational resources. So the goal is to create an assignment that you don't just have students turn in and then you give it back and they throw it away. It's an assignment that has longer term implications for the student. So in working on this project, she looked at peace, social justice, and mindfulness. Um, She was able to then combine this with another high impact practice for the institution, our community book, which happened to be Fear by Thich Nhat Hanh this past year, which is a book all about mindfulness. So it was a perfect time for her to roll out this open pedagogy project. So she had students read the book and work on a number of mindfulness practices throughout the course of the semester. She would start every class session with that minute of mindfulness. If you were there for the open session, you had that minute of mindfulness, so you know how that works. And then she would allow students to choose their own mindfulness techniques throughout the course of the semester. I'm going to move quickly so we can have at least 1 minute for questions at the end. So her assignment was for students to choose their own mindfulness activities and then reflect on which ones were most useful to them, why, and where they would use it, and who else they would recommend these mindfulness practices for. One of her students, that one really quick just to get to the last one. One of her students took a look at the importance of mindfulness for local leaders, and they chose our college president as the local leader they wanted to focus on, and had her actually come in for the final exam session where the student gave a presentation to talk to her about why mindfulness was so important and the techniques that she could use to both be mindful and how those techniques could make her a better leader. So she actually came in for the students' presentation. We had a number of students there, a couple of faculty came in to listen as well, but it was great to see that interaction between the president and our students. Anne certainly plans to have more mindfulness built into our classes and also to create more of these sustainable projects. Since the fellowship required her to work with other faculty members from around the world, each faculty member submitted 2 assignments. So in the coming semesters, they are supposed to not only use the assignment they created, but also use the assignments of the other members of their team. So for this coming summer and also for next fall, Anne will be incorporating the mindfulness assignments from the 2 faculty members she worked with, one from Denmark and one from Nevada. So she will have new assignments to incorporate. And if you're curious about those, like I said, I would include her contact information at the end. So I would say for anyone that wants to take a closer look, please reach out to her. I'm going to zip to the end for her contact information and open the floor for questions. I think we have a minute or 2 left. Are there any questions on those engagement strategies? Engagement and success strategies.
I don't have a question, but I've always been trying to figure out. I teach effective speaking at Bucks County Community College, and I've been trying to figure out ways to incorporate that service learning component without, making it more of a burden for students, giving them, extra busy type of work. I'm wrapping my head around the whole concept of high impact learning. I know there's different ways. Do you recommend any type of reading for us to learn more about those different types of ways? I know there's multiple types of ways. There's service learning, there's, writing intensive.
The
Um,
awesome list. I can send you the list. So we have some that your institution probably does, first year seminar, they
yeah, we
probably
do that.
do
Yeah.
learning communities. We have diversity and global learning, which
Hmm.
Anne does. Our communication course also does it. We're starting to ramp up our undergraduate research, but that's a bit harder to do because it often requires funding, um, capstone courses, internships, learning communities.
Yeah, we
So
have the
learning
capstones. We have a lot of it. Um,
I like the service learning. I think if you're not giving like a 20-hour requirement, it's more doable than we think, especially if you can provide some on-campus opportunities or if you're willing to do it with them. We find that if we have the off-campus requirement, students are much more likely to participate if you put them in a CCBC van and take them and do it.
Yeah, yeah.
So that does tend to work. But our requirement is only 4 hours for
Okay.
students to choose that particular assignment. So it's not burdensome in terms of time. There are also a number of virtual service learning opportunities that have developed over the past 2 years. So that could also work for your students.
Yeah, it's hard because I try to think about different, there's more opportunities in their own areas where they live. And, because Bucks County is a big county, um, I don't know if there's many opportunities for students on campus. So I guess I just need to sit down with some of my other colleagues and see if we can come up with anything that will work for our courses.
I would also talk to Student Life and see if they can work with you on creating campus-based opportunities.
That's a good idea.
We do partner with them quite a bit for a lot of our activities.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions? I feel like we're out of time. I don't remember exactly what time we ended. I think it may have been 11:55, so that would mean we're out of time. Please definitely, if you have additional questions or if you need links to the websites that Dr. McClellan uses on her sustainable project or any of the high impact practice literature, definitely feel free to use our email addresses. If you shoot us an email, we will get you access to anything you need. If you want the presentation, um, also send an email and I can get it to you. Well, thank you, Dr. Diep. If you want access to the slides, though, definitely send an email and I can make sure you have access to them. And I think there's even a way for me to upload them to the conference site. So I'll work on getting that done as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I know there are a lot of options, so thank you
Yes,
so
there
much.
are. Thank you so much.